about taxes on cows, or should I expand the dairy, should I look at some of these pieces? There's a lot of nervousness about how this all is out there, and you never find out about the stuff that was potentially going to get built that doesn't get built. And I believe there's a lot of that happening out there, and I think they're going to be very aggressive. I think we're going to have to talk an awful lot about what the real impact is. Talk about the tax on cows. You probably saw some of the news about that. At one point there was a conversation, okay, the rates coming out talking about a certain tonnage of emissions, you're going to have to pay a tax on those emissions. Well, let's look at what those are on cows or sows. Let's figure out what those are, and we figure out that a cow could be $700 a dairy cow, $750 a dairy cow to pay for the emissions from that cow. Now, that cow didn't suddenly just have emissions. It's always had emissions, and I would argue as well that that stuff originally came from the air as it was. It's not like it's a car that's burning gasoline, that's brand new carbon. This is carbon that was in the air, and it's just putting it back in here. They quickly went back from that and said, no, that'll never happen. There's legislation, some of the hardcore pro-climate change folks out there that said that's the wrong thing to do. The thing about that is people knew exactly what it would cost. What I worry about is the stuff they don't know how much it's going to cost. We can't explain it. It sounds okay on its surface, but when it actually takes place on a farm, it can be very, very expensive. Or in the business or in the town, it can be very expensive. But it's hard, it's not as clear, it's not as piece of cake as what that carbon tax was when you figure out what it was per cow, per sow. And I worry about that continuing to happen. So we're going to have to figure out how to communicate what the pieces is, what the real impact is. We're going to have to try to push forward good science when we can. In some cases, we're going to get regulations that don't make any sense. But we're going to have to figure out how to live with it. It's going to be about, I do think people are going to react. I do think people are going to say, this is crazy at some point. But whether that happens before a bunch of this goes into effect or not, I don't know.
Well, we just have to say we've got to react to all these things. Somebody's got to stop something. You just told us the first part of your talk, how agriculture is doing and the rest of it. If it continues with these same regulations, we're going to be on a downturn. There's people in this country that don't want agriculture. The planet that we live on needs what we produce. We produce all these things. We talk about we produce, 20 billion? That's much of a trillion. I mean, it's very, very valuable. But until someone slows down some of the GPA things, I've got the whole book on, shows what's coming up on it, it'll scare everybody to death. And I'm going to mention a name, because someone in the state slows Mr. Leopold down. It's terrible what it's costing. I've visited with you at Mapleton on probably the landfills and all these other things. But someplace, I don't see why we just have to say we've got to comply with all these things. Some of it is over-regulated. Someone in Washington or someplace has got to put their foot down and said, we need livestock, let's back off on it. Nobody's proven on this carbon thing and the rest of it. We've lived here, the planet's been going for many years, and all at once, we can't control what China does, the rest of them anyway. But we absolutely have got to we've just got to slow this thing down. But just to sit here and say, well, when it comes up, we just have to learn how to pay the $700 a cow and the rest of it. That's not, somewhere we've got to get on the other side of it and have some common sense. Common sense.
Yes, there is no such thing in the
Two things in the state this year, I couldn't believe. 2 different bills on can't have lead weights to balance your wheels in your car, in your truck. First was for state vehicles, then the next time they assigned a senator and representative to, to study the thing for all state cars. I've got a real good friend who's a trucker, and he gets upset at these things. He called me one day and said, Vince, he said, I'm sending a big truck stop up here in Wyoming, I can see 6 lead wheel weights that are falling out some of these semis. She said, I haven't seen one youngster pick one up and start chewing it. But I mean, we've got important things to talk about.
Yeah.
We've used lead wheel weights for years and years and years and years. You know, people can't sell, they bought articles they can't sell because there's a little lead in the paint and all these things. And certainly, they need, we're just controlling people's livelihoods if they can't operate. And livestock, we've got a feedlot up here in that turn that can feed 15,000 head. There's no cattle in it now because of all the regulations. We know there has to be regulations. And we've done a great job in agriculture. Look at the sky mess and the terrible things we used to put on this planet. Now, you know, by genetics, we've solved all those things. If you just give some time to these things, it'll work its way out. But there's people that don't have any common, I mean, we need more people who have some common sense. But I just can't accept that we just have to cave in on every one of these things. Our county can't afford $300,000 to $500,000 on our landfill. It's no need for it. No garbage days in Illinois. All we've got is C&D material, you know, and they're just bound to determine, you know, that we got to spend that. We haven't had a rate increase for 20 years. People have complaints, everything's going fine. But the rules and regulations to the present time, you can't believe the question has.
So that's
the irrigation thing. You know.
Perfect.
We're out of control. It should be under the Secretary of Agriculture, is what it should be, as far as I'm concerned. You know.
That's perfect lead-in into about 15 months from now, we have an election. One of the reasons we're here now with these kinds of situations is our views were not reflected, did not prevail in the last election. And we have a chance to be able to turn these pieces down. There is a huge amount, as you're saying, there's a huge amount that's at stake. A huge amount that's at stake. Because some of these things don't get undone once they get done. And it costs money in between, and you just don't go back. You don't go back and undo them. We have to do, and you're all here, I'm speaking to the choir because you're here. But we have to do everything we can to get that story out. Some of the folks don't understand what the impact is. They need to know what that impact is and why they should care and why they should understand how to vote that way. And certainly in this area of the state, we get more of those votes than in other areas of the state. We need to compensate for a lot of other places in the state when we do our voting next time. And elections matter. And when we got a battle in between, but the best way to win and prevent that stuff from happening is to get the majority back. Iowa House, we absolutely have a chance. With the governor's race, I believe there's a real significant opportunity to be able to win that governor's race again back. And if we get either one of those, we totally change the dynamics from what we have right now. Steve.
No, I've said this a million times, and I guess I believe more every day. I'm convinced you could take 500,000 people down to the Capitol tomorrow and lobby them on any particular piece of legislation. And I don't want to sound like I'm judgmental here, but I think a lot of those Democrats are politically brain dead. And I guess
Just a little, Steve, just a little.
I guess I would encourage people not only to work for their own legislative candidates, but also to call the state party and say, hey, is there a competitive legislative race within 50 or 75 miles of where I live? And then you need to get 2 or 3 carloads of people to go down to those districts and help that candidate go door to door and knock doors. When I was at DC at the RNC meeting last week, we've all heard about Tim Gill and all of his money tentacles here in Iowa for the homosexual rights lobby. Well, what's even more frightening, he's part of a cabinet of 7 people like him all over the country who have their tentacles in literally thousands of legislative races across the country. And if we don't step up and match that effort in working for those candidates, we're going to get plowed under, I'm afraid. So I guess I'm here, I'm not a negative person, but I encourage you not only to work for your candidates, but to load up 2 or 3 carloads and go to somewhere 50 to 100 miles around here and help the candidates in a tight race and put them over the top. Because we need to lobby, but again, the Democrats are controlled by these far left groups, and like people like the Madeline Shills and the Jason Schultz and the Jim Seymours to get the job done.
And it can races that we ended up losing, that was with Obama on the ticket that turned out a ton of folks. And the next race is completely different. One of the nice things